Hello, everybody. Pastor Randy here. Welcome to Making It Simple. Man, I tell you what, a beautiful Wednesday, even with a little rain outside. Certainly there's places around us that need some rain. And so we're grateful because God knows exactly what we need. We touched yesterday on a very deep, deep subject. The idea, the understanding of becoming one with Christ. He would later speak on that. He said, "That is my desire, that we would become one as I and the Father are one." This subject yesterday for the group that he was talking to was one of great confusion and almost offensive to some because he spoke of consuming his flesh and drinking of his blood. As we will see today, and I'm going to go through several passages just to read them to you, and then we'll talk about that. Not to expedite this particular subject, but I think to bring it full circle, it's important. When we hear things in life more than one time, there's generally a couple of reasons. Obviously, depending on what the subject is. Some people are just trying to be annoying. Other times, depending on, again, the outlet by which it's displayed or given, it could be to try to influence you. It could be try to get you to change your mind. But in the case of the words of Christ, in the case of the gospel message, anything that is repetitive is something God is trying to get you to listen to. In other words, he's trying to get your attention. He's trying to say, this is important. Don't miss this. Many of us remember when we were in school, if a teacher would use that type of phraseology, you probably should write this down. You might see it again on Friday when we have the test. When God continually repeats something or has it recorded more than one time, there's a message there. There's a message there. Just like you've heard me talk about, he who has an ear, let him hear. We've seen that several times, and then it gets repeated consistently through the book of Revelation. When God has a message for us, and when I say for us, I'm talking about everybody, the entire human race. He wants you to listen. There again, we go back to what I spoke on a few days ago on the agency, the office, if you will, the gift of free will. We don't have to. We don't have to. I live here in Florida. I've mentioned that many, many times. It is certain areas that are extremely busy when it comes to traffic, when it comes to, the amount of people that are passing through in an automobile or vehicle of some type. My point to bring that up, there are signs everywhere about how careful you should be when it comes to trying to walk into that, to try to cross those areas. Friends, I'm telling you, every day, literally, when I'm coming to work, you turn the radio on, every day there's a report of somebody getting run over. Accident, not accident, whatever the case, not paying attention, not listening. The warnings are everywhere. You have to be careful. But if those warnings aren't heeded, or the one driving is not paying attention, terrible things happen. We lived in Arizona several years ago, many years ago. Same thing, Grand Canyon. You would see articles in the paper nearly every week of how many people fell in. Now, for those of you that have never been there, you would think, how on earth is that possible? How could someone fall in? Because the majority, believe this or not, it's true. The majority of the areas around the Grand Canyon are not guarded. There is no fence there or any kind of way to keep you from going in. There's signs everywhere saying, be careful, pay attention, don't get too close. But every single week, somebody would fall in. They would get too close, whether it's on foot or, strangely enough, even in their vehicle. They would see just how close can I get without falling in. Friends, that is the problem with so many things today. Let me see just how close I can get without getting caught, without getting hurt, without getting run over, without getting bit. I mean, we could just go on and on and on. The old saying, if you play with fire long enough, you'll get burned, is absolutely true. No question about it. When it comes to the reality of life and the reality of truth, you can only ignore it so long, and it will ultimately become a reality as it pertains to consequence in the eternal. This is why the words of Christ are oftentimes repetitive. It is not because he didn't have anything else to say. It is not because he was a kind of a one subject kind of a person. Not at all. He was always talking about the eternal, never the temporary. Because as we know, and as you've heard me teach many, many times, the temporary is just that. It only lasts for a little while. It's a very short period of time. Whether it's a day, an hour, a week, or 100 years, it's still temporary. It is not eternal. The only thing that we have that is eternal is what God offers. And this is why he continues to say, as he said yesterday, if you do not take of what I'm offering you, and I'm not making you, but what I'm telling you is if you do not take of what I'm offering you, there is no life in you. There's later in this same book of John, he would say, he who has the Son has life. He who has not the Son has not life. That's not speaking of living and breathing. He's talking about quality, and he's talking about the promise of eternity with him. Because we get back to the earlier parts of John chapter 1 when John the Baptist is speaking of the light of life that is on the way. You can have an electrical switch on your wall. If you never hook the wire to it, you don't have the electricity. It's there. You can turn it up and down. You can flip it on and off all day long. It'll never turn on a thing because there's no life hooked to it. It's there. It exists. It's real. But it's not connected. Here the Lord is saying, if you don't have me, you don't have life in you. How many people do we see walking around us today that are in essence the walking dead? You know, again, I'm not talking about the zombie show. Well, I guess I am in a degree I'm using that phrase. But we're not talking about flesh-eating, brain-eating zombies, or we're not talking about some kind of foolishness. But think of the concept. How many people around us are living, alive, breathing, but they have no life in them. They don't enjoy anything. Everything to them is a blur. Everything to them is blah. I don't look forward to anything. I hate this. I hate that. And they don't look forward to anything. They have no joy. The Lord here is saying, if I'm not in you, if you have not consumed what I've offered, in other words, accepted it, believed it, taken it on, made it a part of your life, there's something missing. So he goes on in our passages for today. It says, whoso, again, anybody that wants it. You know, think of it this way. I know that in the modern times now, especially after this last year, there's not a lot of buffet style places or whatever. But for the sake of argument, get that in the theater of your mind. You're at the Golden Corral, you're at Duff's, you're at the wherever, the buffet line, the Chinese place. Anybody that walks up to that buffet line that have, paid their way in or whatever, and they've got a plate, they can get as much as they want. It's available. Anybody. Doesn't matter who walks through that door. If they paid their $5.95 or $13.95 or whatever it is, they can walk up to that buffet and they get as much as they can hold till they plain just about bust. Jesus says, whoso wants this, who will take my flesh and drink my blood, has eternal life. Again, repeating what he had just said. And he says, and I will. That again is an affirmative statement. We need to understand when he says, I am the living bread, he's making a powerful, bold proclamation. When he says here, I will, that's a promise. That's a promise of something to come. I want us to think about that. Oftentimes in life today, we hear many say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And it never happens. Whether intentional, whether time gets in the way, whatever. We could find 1,000 different reasons that it didn't happen. Regardless, it's not a guarantee. It's not. But when God says it, you can put it in the bank and draw interest on it because it's going to happen. Many people have forgotten that today. Many people think, oh, well, that's they've been saying that forever, and that's a bunch of hooey. Nobody believes that. I've been hearing that all my life, and God's time is not our time. When he says, I will, you can guarantee that. And he says here, I will raise them up at the last day, speaking of the resurrection of all the saints, of all the ones that have come to know Christ. He says, whoever takes of what I offer, flesh and blood, whoever takes that will have eternal life, and I will raise them up at the resurrection. He says, because my flesh is meat and my blood is drink indeed. Again, a statement of controversy, a statement of confusion to those who were literally sitting there listening, because again, even as we read that, it's kind of gross, if we're just honest, because it sounds like consumption, cannibalism, if you will. That's not what he's talking about. He's talking about substance. He's talking about something that in the idea of eating, let's use that analogy for a moment. I grew up, of course, in the South. When you had that, you have different sayings, maybe different ones than you have other places, but a lot of it is universal. But neither here nor there. There was an old saying, about certain types of food. They call it stick to your ribs kind of stuff. In other words, you were full for a long time. Maybe you could have it, in the afternoon at 2 or 3 o'clock, and you might not want anything else later. You might be full until the next day. Heavy stuff, whatever, gravy and mashed potatoes and different things. He's saying here, what I offer you is substantial. What I offer you doesn't wear off. What I offer you is not like when you have bacon and eggs or whatever for breakfast and by 12 o'clock you're starving to death. He said, it don't work that way. What I'm offering you is, he says here, indeed, it's real. It works. If you will take of it, if you will have it, if you will believe in what it is that I have done for you, it will last you for eternity. Is there anything else in this life or anything else that we know of that lasts forever? No. No. Houses fall down, cars quit, bodies fall apart, relationships end. That's not to be negative. That's real. The same way even if we look at some of the things that aren't so great, storms and health issues, they don't last forever either. They're seasons. They end in one capacity or another. The Lord is saying here, if you want what I'm offering, which is eternal, this is how you get it. You believe in me. And what I'm offering you, you take of it. You consume it. Meaning, as I said yesterday and as I'm saying again today, you believe it. You embrace it. It becomes who you are. It's not just a belief system. It's not just certainly not a religion or just something that you do on Sunday morning. This becomes you. It becomes who you are, what you do, what you believe. He says, he who eats my flesh and drinks my blood dwells in me and I in him. We become one. Because I know that I cannot function without him. He is my everything. There was an old Elvis song, and it says that, I long to be his possession. He is my everything. When he uses this, you're in me, I'm in you, that's a oneness that we can count on. That is a oneness that makes it all work, because the dependency that we have on him is for everything, for substance, for wisdom, for knowledge, for the ability to do everything. His dependence on us is that we'll continue to show it to everybody else. We become one. Where, in other words, you can't hide it. See, many of us, from a genealogy standpoint, okay, from a DNA standpoint, whatever the case, we look like our parents. We've passed that on, okay, in some capacity or another. Maybe there's even certain other quirks or different things that we pick up on, or that we develop as the years go by, that remind other people of someone. I get often told that, something from my grandfather, maybe some things even from my dad, whatever the case. My kids are going to be the same way. God is saying to us, our relationship is to be so close, so intimate, so real, that when people see you, they see me. Why is that important? Friends, our world is falling apart. And again, I'm not a gloom and doom kind of guy. Not at all. But our world is falling apart. And I'm not talking about all the foolishness you hear on TV about climate, this and all that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about emotionally and spiritually and morally and ethically and all the other things. We have got a mess. It's darkness like most of us have never, not only never seen, because none of us has ever seen anything like this, but that we could have even ever imagined. This is Hollywood movie script writer, not real kind of imagination that has become very real. Very real. We don't want to believe that it's happened, but it has. Where do we play a role in that as believers? We are to be lights into that dark. We're not called to be judge and jury. We're called to be lights into the dark. In other words, for every single person that you know or that you see that is struggling with something, whatever it may just be life. It may be an addiction. It may be an emotional battle. It may be a moral issue, whatever. They need to see an example that it can be better. It might not be our job to be the one to pull them out of the ditch or